Hunters left their stone points and butchered animal bones at kill sites all across North America. Radiocarbon dating in the 1950s showed that the oldest site was 11,400 years old. 11,400 years ago marked the end of the last ice age, a period when much of North America had been buried beneath massive glaciers up to 2 miles thick.
When you've got that much ice on land, what happens is that it draws essentially water out of the oceans. So with that much ice on land, sea levels worldwide are lowered. By lowering sea levels, you expose the continental shelf between Siberia and Alaska. And so you create this entryway, this land bridge. And that made it possible for people to walk to the Americas.
As the Ice Age came to an end, an ice-free corridor appeared between the receding glaciers, opening the door to the Americas for the first time, it seemed, in human history.
As that corridor opens up, maybe about 11,500, 12,000 years ago, so it all seemed to work out very, very beautifully in terms of the timing of getting these New World peoples from Asia into the Americas.
But now there's been some real changes in the thinking of this. This model is too simple.
The biggest challenge to the story comes from the southern hemisphere. In 1996, a group of prominent archaeologists met in southern Chile at a place called Monteverde. They saw weapons, tools, and other artifacts dated to 12,500 years old. More evidence comes from southern Brazil. In prehistoric rock shelters, archaeologists have found some of the oldest human remains in the New World. One skeleton, called Lucia, is more than 11,000 years old.
The date of 11,000 makes her potentially the oldest skeleton in the New World. Her early age, combined with data from Monteverde, which is at least 12 to 13,000 years old, certainly means that people must have been migrating into South America much earlier than we previously thought.
We don't really know who these early people were. We don't know how many people came, and we don't know when they came in. So the whole idea about one migration across the Bering Land Bridge 12,000 years ago, and moving into America, accounting for all peoples, all languages, all cultures, is now thrown out. It's gone.
The Ice Age glaciers that once blocked the way from Asia to North America began to recede only about 12,000 years ago. If people were coming into the New World before that, how did they get past the ice? Archaeologists are now searching for answers along the Alaskan coast. Yaro Vara is one of several Native Americans on the project.
It's really exciting every time when you so much as clink a rock. It could be an artifact. You never know what it could be. It could be a 10,000-year-old tool. It could be a bone. It could be anything. You just don't know. And so whenever you hear anything, you have to go around it really carefully and find out what it is.
This excavation has uncovered a continuous record of caribou, fox, and bear bones dating back 50,000 years.
Also in this cave, we found seal bones that appeared to be scavenged by bears. What this suggests is that bears survived the entire last period of glaciation. And if bears could have survived here, it's certainly clear that humans could have also.
It appears that the Ice Age glaciers were not a barrier to the New World after all. Parts of the coast were ice-free, even when glaciers covered half of North America. So a coastal migration route would have been open to the early people of Asia. Then, as the glaciers began to recede between 11 and 12,000 years ago, the interior route opened up. A natural pathway, perhaps, for nomadic hunters from Northeast Asia.
So these could be very, very different populations coming into the New World, literally thousands of years apart from one another, possibly from different sources in northeastern Asia. We don't really know that. But certainly we are looking at the possibility of multiple migrations into the New World, possibly going on different routes.
All stories of early human history are incomplete. Advances in human genetics, archaeology, and anthropology will add new chapters, or perhaps rewrite it altogether.
Outside, thousands of Incas are dead. The rest of the army has retreated to the hills. In spite of a massive imbalance in numbers, Spanish horses, swords, and strategy have proved decisive. But the Spaniards possessed another weapon they didn't even know they had. A weapon of mass destruction that had marched invisibly ahead of them. Today, the war against infectious disease is waged at biological research centers like Porton Down in southern England. They produce vaccines here against the world's deadliest viruses. In the 16th century, there were no vaccines, and there was no protection from the rampant spread of infectious disease. "12 years before Pizarro arrived at Cajamarca, a Spanish ship sailed to Mexico. On board, one of the slaves was suffering from the first signs of a fever. He was the first person to bring a deadly disease to the American mainland. The disease was smallpox. Within weeks, the smallpox virus would spread from a single source to infect thousands of Native Americans.
Smallpox gets into the body when you breathe in the particles, and they attach themselves to the back of your throat and the inside of your lungs. About 2 to 3 days into the illness, then the classic rash appears. And in its worst forms, this takes over the whole of the body with initially pimples and then enormous blisters until the whole of the skin, starting with the hands and the face and then spreading down to cover the rest of the body, is taken over by the smallpox blisters. From that time on, the patient is highly infectious. Because each of those blisters is packed full of smallpox particles, then if you burst the blister, the fluid will come out and large numbers of viruses will be spilled onto whatever it touches. "10 to 12 days later, his friends would begin to be taken ill, and then 10 to 12 days after that, their friends. That kind of rate means the disease spreads exponentially. Its rate of increase gets bigger and bigger and bigger the more people are infected, until eventually it will cause tremendous devastation in the population."
The first smallpox epidemic of the New World swept through Central America and reached the Inca Empire. Wherever it went, the virus decimated native populations, making them easier prey for Spanish conquest. But why were the germs so one-sided? Why did the Spaniards pass their diseases on to the Incas and not the other way around?
This is Pizarro's secret weapon. Pigs and cows, sheep and goats, domestic animals. Remember that Pizarro was a swineherd. He grew up in huts like this, in intimate contact with domestic animals, breathing in their germs, drinking the germs in their milk, and it was from the germs of domestic animals that the killer diseases of humans evolved. For example, our flu evolved from a disease of pigs transmitted via chickens and ducks. We acquired measles from cattle. We acquired smallpox from domestic animals, so that these worst killers of human people were a legacy of 10,000 years of contact with our beloved domestic animals.
During the Middle Ages, infectious diseases swept through Europe and claimed millions of lives. But paradoxically, repeated epidemics made Europeans more resilient. In each outbreak, there were always some people who were genetically better able to fight off the virus. These people were more likely to survive and have children. In the process, they'd pass on their genetic resistance. Over centuries, whole populations acquired some degree of protection against the spread of diseases like smallpox, a protection the Incas never had.
When smallpox was taken to the New World, nobody in the New World had ever seen a disease like this before, so the number of people who were susceptible was much greater. There was no natural immunity, and so therefore the number of people who could both contract the disease and then spread it, and the number of people to receive it once it had been spread, was much higher. more people would die, and more people would be susceptible to catch it in the first place. It would spread rapidly throughout the population, and the death toll would be enormous.
Why hadn't Native Americans encountered smallpox before? And why didn't they have any deadly diseases of their own to pass on to the Spaniards? It's simply because they didn't have the same history of contact with farm animals. The Incas had llamas, but llamas aren't like European cows and sheep. They're not milked, they're not kept in large herds, and they don't live in barns and huts alongside humans. There was no significant exchange of germs between llamas and people.
The key to Diamond's argument is the distribution of farm animals around the world. Aside from the llama, all the large farm animals were native to Eurasia and North Africa. None was ever domesticated in North America, Sub-Saharan Africa, or Australia. As a result, the worst epidemic diseases were also native to Eurasia and North Africa, and were then spread around the world with deadly effect. There's been a long debate about the number of indigenous people who died in the Spanish conquest of the New World. Some scholars think there may have been a population of 20 million Native Americans, and the vast majority, perhaps 95%, were killed by Old World diseases. A continent virtually emptied of its people. After the initial...
But the Spaniard, his horse and his pig would never have been so successful in the conquest of the New World without a hidden passenger. It is when the Old and New Worlds touch that the American Indian meets his worst enemy. A very black dose for the continent. A Spanish missionary reports.
An epidemic broke out, a sickness of pustules. Large bumps spread on people. Some were entirely covered, on the face, the head, the chest. They lay in their dwellings and sleeping places, no longer able to move or stir. The pustules caused great desolation. Very many people died of them, and many starved to death. No one took care of others any longer.
Deadly diseases contaminate the entire continent.
For the natives,
writes a chronicler,
they are near all dead of the smallpox, so the Lord hath cleared our title to what we possess.
To this day, scientists are still working to identify these diseases, to trace their paths, and count the dead.
Smallpox was accidentally introduced to the Americas in the 16th century. The smallpox virus is very hardy. In blankets that are used by smallpox victims, the scabs can live for weeks carrying the virus. And smallpox can also pass from host to host on board a transatlantic vessel until it reaches the Americas. And of course, once smallpox reached the Americas, it was introduced to millions of new hosts, human hosts, who had no acquired immunities to these diseases. And so smallpox, together with measles and influenza, had a devastating impact on Native American populations. No one knows exactly what the mortality was. Conservative estimates are about 50%. It was probably closer to 90% or even higher.
Through trade between native peoples, diseases spread throughout the whole continent. Many natives die of foreign diseases without ever seeing a European. Microbes move faster than the conquistadors who brought them. Some 50 years after Columbus discovered the Americas, conquistadors and explorers find neither towns nor people. No one stands in their way. Most of the people are dead, and nature reclaims the land. Everything that they now find is pure wilderness, a Garden of Eden without humans.
A thousand different kinds of birds and beasts of the forest, which have never been known, neither in shape nor name, and whereof there is no mention made, neither among the Latins nor Greeks, nor any other nations of the world.
Reports a Spanish missionary.
It may be God hath made a new creation of beast.
Explorers send exotic plants and animals, evidence of God's second creation, on the ships back to Spain.
Hombres, cargad.